Something very disturbing from Friday, and it hasn't, excuse me, I had to sneeze, hasn't gotten a lot of attention that I'm aware of. Jason Leopold, who writes for Truthout, but also he's the editor-in-chief of a website, Public Record. It's pubrecord.org, pubrecord.org. This website you ought to put in your favorites list. But Jason Leopold has a piece out, and it's being totally, as far as I know, totally ignored. And it's astonishing. What he's talking about is 2 years before our invasion and occupation of Iraq, oil executives and foreign policy advisors told the Bush administration that the United States would remain, quote, a prisoner of its energy dilemma, end quote, as long as Saddam Hussein was in power. Industry executives, in other words, suggested we invade Iraq. Now, remember early on, I remember because I was there, so was Kathy, so were a lot of people, Will Pitt and Ben Birch and all kinds of people, to these massive anti-war demonstrations, the big one in the United States, about 500,000 people, 400,000 showed up in D.C. When was it, Kathy? In December of 2002, massive demonstration. And you could see lots of signs that said, no blood for oil, it's all about oil. And everybody ignored that. Everybody said, oh, Christ, you people are crazy. When I say everybody, I mean government, media. We were nuts. Everybody was nuts. The millions of people around the globe that said the United States is preparing to invade Iraq for the oil resources, those people were considered to be loons, absolute lunatics. All the right-wingers in this country, you filthy sons of bitches, I will hate you until I die. All of you. You really turned my stomach. Don't get me started. But mainstream media, everybody in this country who is against the war, for the obvious reason that we knew why the war was about to be launched, were labeled as loons, lunatics, absolute lunatics, unpatriotic, America haters. Jesus, this country is wall-to-wall with dumbasses. Huh? A report, an April 2001 report, check the date, April 2001 report. It was titled Strategic Policy Challenges for the 21st Century. It was prepared by the James A. Baker Institute for Public Policy. Yeah, that James Baker. And the U.S. Council on Foreign Relations at the request of Dick Cheney. And as Jason Leopold writes, in retrospect, it appears that this report helped focus administration thinking on why it made geopolitical sense to oust Hussein, whose country sat on the world's second largest oil reserves. The report said, quote, Iraq remains a destabilizing influence to the flow of oil to international markets from the Middle East, end quote. Which, let me digress, was horse snot. That's an absolute lie. Why? The exact opposite was true. Had it not been the embargo and the oil for food plan that was just ripe for fraud and graft by everybody on earth except this miserable son of a bitch Saddam Hussein, why would Saddam Hussein not want to flood the global markets with oil? There's no way you drive down the price by flooding the market. The oil markets don't respond to the normal supply and demand stuff. The oil market prices respond to one thing only, and those are the futures traders who drive it up, let it go down, drive it up, let it go down. OPEC has no more control over that than the man in the moon. So Saddam had a chance to make billions, trillions. We're to believe, though, that he wasn't interested in the money. Yeah, okay. Back to what Jason Leopold writes. According to this report put together for Cheney, quote, Saddam Hussein has also demonstrated a willingness to threaten to use the oil weapon and to use his own export program to manipulate oil markets. Therefore, the U.S. should conduct an immediate policy review toward Iraq, including military, energy, economic, and political/diplomatic assessments. Military assessments. Now, keep in mind, the sentence, Saddam Hussein has demonstrated willingness to threaten to use the oil weapon and to use his own export program to manipulate oil markets. I mean, how stupid are we? How stupid are we in this country? I'll tell you how stupid we are. We are the stupidest collection of dolts ever to exist. In the first place, since the early 90s, the oil market in Iraq was under absolute embargo by the United Nations, by the United States. The oil for food or oil for whatever the hell, oil for medicine plant was a complete joke. How in the hell Saddam Hussein in 2001 was going to manipulate oil markets by withholding or not withholding oil when he had absolutely nothing to say about it, and his oil fields weren't producing anyway. But the report goes on, and on, and on. As Leopold writes, the advisory committee that helped prepare the report included Louis Giusti, a Shell Corporation non-executive director, John Manzoni, regional president of British Petroleum, David O'Reilly, chief executive of Chevron Texaco, and James Baker, after whom this so-called Public Policy Institute was named, was a prominent oil industry lawyer who served as Secretary of State under George Herbert Walker Bush and was counsel to Bush Cheney, remember, during the Florida recount, or the ending of the Florida recount in 2000. So here's this collection of goddamn horrific criminals, oil thugs, who've decided to murder 5,000 Americans, and so far they've succeeded. And they also, and more will die. And also, these thugs, these rancid bastards, decided to murder even more, hundreds of thousands more Iraqis. The fact that they had already murdered at least 1 million over the previous decade was not enough. They wanted more blood for oil. And so they got it. Ken Lay, then chairman of the energy trading, so-called Enron Corporation, also made recommendations that were included in this report, authorized by Dick Cheney. As Jason Leopold goes on, at the time of the report, Cheney was leading an energy task force. Remember that? Made up of powerful industry executives who assisted him in drafting a comprehensive, quote, national energy policy, end quote, for George dumbass Bush. Remember all that? However, Bush's first Treasury Secretary, Paul O'Neill, later described a White House interest in invading Iraq and controlling its vast oil reserves dating back to the first days of the Bush presidency. And as Jason Leopold points out, in Ron Susskind's 2004 book titled The Price of Loyalty, O'Neill said an invasion of Iraq was on the agenda at the first National Security Council meeting. Remember? Yeah, you remember this, folks. There was even a map for a post-war occupation marking out how Iraq's oil fields would be carved up. Now, we talked about this a couple of years ago. You know about this. We all know about this. And now Jason Leopold is trying to let the American public know about this report put together by oil company executives that recommended the invasion of Iraq to steal their oil. Does this not make you pissed off? Does this not make you angry, or have you run out of anger reserves? If you have, I understand. I really understand. Even at that early date, way back in 2001, the message from Bush was, quote, find a way to do this, end quote, according to O'Neill, who was a critic of the Iraq invasion and was forced out of his job in December 2002. And the New Yorker's Jane Mayer later made another discovery, a secret National Security Council document dated February 3rd, 2001, check the date, only 2 weeks after Bush took office, instructing National Security Council officials to cooperate with Cheney's task force, which was melding two previously unrelated areas of policy, which were the review of operational policies toward rogue states and actions regarding the capture of new and existing oil and gas fields, end quote. Do you still have enough reserves to be pissed off again?